non-reverting lit funds to sidewalks and alleys. And I will refer to Councilman Russ Gale, who is bringing this forward.
Thank you. That's very kind. There have been a series of questions since the discussion last week that I'm prepared to answer. But I didn't know if you wanted me to proceed first, or I understand that the administration wanted to speak. I'd be happy to.
Let's go ahead and have the administration come forward if there's someone here to represent this ordinance amendment. See a couple of faces coming forward.
Maggie.
Get this out of the way before I forget.
No.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Sean Gunawardhan, Public Works Director, and I have with me my right-of-way manager, Nick Jarrell, and we just wanted to give you a little bit of an update of what we do with our sidewalk improvement program, how we've administered it, and how we spend our funding, particularly the money that was appropriated through the LIT non-reverting fund approved in 2017. What you're looking at here is our sidewalk improvements, and I hope you can all see the green dots. There's a bunch of green dots, orange dots, some areas highlighted with, some neighborhoods highlighted with red, and some neighborhoods that are highlighted in yellow. And what these all represent are neighborhoods that we have done existing sidewalk improvements in. The green dots are actually areas that we have had petitioned, whether it was through a cost share process or whether it was through 100% city funded effort. All those green dots represent areas that we have invested in sidewalk improvements. The orange dots are actually the ADA ramps. That's federally mandated. We had to install ADA ramps throughout the city. We have been in the process of doing that since the 1990s, and every year we add $500,000 into our ADA ramp program. The red outlines are for areas that we have been doing what is called leveling. Leveling is a new tool that we introduced into our sidewalk improvement toolkit. Basically what it does is any sidewalk slabs that are still intact, that have been heaved due to either settlement of the subbase or due to upheaval of tree roots. What we do is we take down the roots, we jack in some sludge or epoxy material and level the sidewalk so that the two adjacent slabs are intact. That has proved to be a much more cost-effective strategy than removing and replacing an entire sidewalk slab. So that's a new tool we introduced into our toolbox about 3 years ago. Yeah. And the trip hazard elimination has been something that we've been doing quite a bit of for quite a few years now. That basically is areas where we have had trip heaving of the sidewalk no more than 1.5 inches. We bring a piece of grinding equipment, grind it down so that the trip hazard is eliminated. That has been a very competitive program, and we can get a sidewalk trip hazard eliminated at a unit cost of somewhere around $20-25, which is about as cheap as we can get. We have about 3 or 4 firms that are bidding on it, and they've been extremely competitive. So that's another tool that we've had in our toolkit. Just talk a little bit about the LIT non-reverting funding. In 2017, we had the increase of the LIT non-reverting allocation dedicated specifically for riverfront, alleys, and sidewalk. And sidewalk include new sidewalk construction as well as sidewalk rehabilitation. At the time, we were investing about $600,000 in sidewalk rehabilitation only. And there was a request from council at the time to double that, basically by matching from the LIT non-reverting fund. So that would have meant we were putting in $1.2 million in that program. We more than exceeded that program, in fact. And we have, in the 4 years since 2018, we have invested almost $8 million in sidewalk rehabilitation. Of that almost $8 million, about 3.5 million has been from the LIT non-reverting fund. What you're seeing in this slide here is the three things that Public Works was charged with using the LIT non-reverting fund was sidewalk rehabilitation, new sidewalk construction, and alleys. So we have spent about $6.8 million on our alleys. We've done about 12 miles of alleys. We have 140 miles, though. We've got a long way to go, but we've done about 12 of those miles. 12 miles is quite a bit when you consider that an alley is about a city block length that is just under 500 feet. So 12 miles is a pretty substantial amount of alleys that we have done. Still a long way to go. The Fort Wayne Community Schools issue with sidewalk, we worked with them in 2015. What happened with them, as you all know, was that they created no transportation zones because of their hit through the property tax reductions. And as a result of that, those no transportation zones, we had to look at providing additional sidewalk along corridors that did not have sidewalk. Now, these are not all neighborhood streets. Many of these are major thoroughfares where kids were asked to walk along the side of the street or in the street because of the lack of infrastructure. So we worked with Fort Wayne Community Schools, and in 2015, they identified about $70 million worth of priorities. And the $70 million was in 2015 dollars. In today's money, it would probably be significantly more. Of that $70 million, we have invested about $8.9 million from the LIT non-reverting. We have added a few more miles of sidewalk through other roadway projects, federal aid projects, but there is still a long way to go for us to meet those requirements as well. And finally, the sidewalk rehabilitation work, like I said, we have invested about almost $8 million. Of that $8 million, only about 3.5 has come from the LIT non-reverting. And we've done around 60 miles. If we look at all the segments that we have improved, we've improved about 60 miles of sidewalk. This is of a total of 1,600 miles that we have throughout the city. Does it mean that we are anywhere close to being done? Absolutely not. In all three areas, we have a lot further to go, primarily because when it comes to alleys, we had not invested in alleys for over 100 years, ever since they were built. When it came to sidewalk, we had sidewalk that was built, but never really invested in them to improve them for a very long time. And the new sidewalk infrastructure, when a lot of our roads were constructed and built, they were never built to address our pedestrian needs as they are today. So our needs are still pretty substantial. So what we are looking at with this ordinance is, this is a distribution of the LIT non-reverting fund. And if you look at, I don't know which one I'm pointing at.
You just point
Okay.
at the laptop.
Use the laptop.
The laptop, if you point it at the laptop, it'll
Oh,
change.
it'll show up?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we are looking at tax revenues of somewhere around $10 million a
It's
year.
free to watch
And ever since
the city council
ever since
meeting, but you gotta pay
2018,
at least
a
like
lot of this money has been actually
$9.99 to
front
watch
loaded to us
Ozark.
because we were
And
only
people be
supposed to get
watching
about a
Ozark,
third of
though.
this for alleys and
You might
sidewalk
start
reconstruction.
watching
and
the city council meeting.
Since it was front loaded to us, we've actually been getting about $5 to $6 million the past few years. This year we're actually working with $6 million, which is about 2/3 of the tax revenue from the LIT non-reverting. Now we know that as riverfront starts picking up, we are going to lose that investment, and we're going to start going down. Eventually, we're going to taper down to about $3 million per year. What this ordinance is asking us to do is take $1 million of that $3 million and invest it in sidewalk rehabilitation projects. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we prioritize our existing sidewalk infrastructure. First of all, our biggest priority is to address ADA mandates. Anywhere where we get a complaint that is ADA related, which is a federal mandate obviously, we have to address it, and we address it at 100% city cost. Anywhere we need to provide access to schools, libraries, parks, or any other public facilities, there are ADA requirements that we have to address. We have to make every one of those facilities accessible by ADA, and these are our high traffic corridors when it comes to pedestrians. So we have to do those at 100% city cost. Next, we look at areas where sidewalk or pedestrian infrastructure is the primary mode of transportation. and those are typically economically depressed areas where people don't have access to vehicles, or they only have access to a limited amount of vehicles, and there is a lot of transit usage. So we identified those areas for prioritizing where we spend our 100% funded sidewalk enhancement. Obviously, connecting neighborhoods to schools is still a huge priority for us. There's a lot of schools that are still not connected to their neighborhoods. What we're trying to do is to, even though there might be sidewalk within the neighborhoods, the neighborhoods themselves are not connected to each other or to the schools, and that has been the emphasis for our initiative with 420 community schools. So since 2018, the city has invested, like I said, almost $8 million in sidewalk repairs. 43% of this has been through LIT non-reverting. 41% has come from LIT ED, which used to be what we call seeded, the Q cap development and general funds, and 16%, $1.3 million in the last 4 years, has come from the cost share program. That's about $350,000 a year on average. The cost share program, by the way, has been tremendously popular. Nick will tell you a little bit about the history of the program, because we have seen significant improvements in the amount of people who are willing to participate in it. So what this ordinance does not do, it doesn't change the original plan to use no less than 1/3 for alleys and sidewalks. We know that. The money is set for over a 25-year period. It does not create new money for neighborhood investments or sidewalk. This is pretty important because we've already been getting some calls from residents saying, we hear there's new money for sidewalk improvements and we'd like to know where that money is coming from. What it does do is shift allocation among sidewalks and alleys. So if we are to put more money into sidewalk rehabilitation, we've got to take it away from new sidewalk construction or from alleys, which are both extremely popular programs for us. The way the ordinance was originally written, when we read it, it eliminates the cost share for sidewalk repairs with LIT non-reverting at no cost to the resident. So if you took $1 million and used it at 100% within the area that was identified, that means $1 million of it has to be spent on non-cost share projects. So basically, no LIT non-reverting funds can be used on cost share projects, which was contrary to what Council had originally requested in 2017 when the program, when the LIT non-reverting fund was actually set up. And it also creates an inside the beltway priority, and we talked about this quite a bit, and I know Nick will go into it a little bit, because we are going to have a situation where we will have a resident from the Northcrest neighborhood, which is an asphalt street neighborhood, one of the largest neighborhoods in 3rd District, that have a lot of sidewalk needs, asking for sidewalk to be repaired in that neighborhood. And they are being asked to cost share when someone in Forest Park, which is inside this area, is probably going to be given priority over the Northwest neighborhood request, and they will get 100% funding for it. So those are the types of things that we have concerns about if it does not get approved with the Councilwoman ChangeMakes amendment. Public works outreach. I'm going to hand it over to Nick because he's the one who's done a lot of the work here, and I think it's important to understand how we really go about this.
Evening, Council. So, as Sean stated in Public Works, we've done a lot of outreach in regards to the quadrant meetings since 2018 or so. We've attended every quadrant meeting that they have in the districts, and as well as meeting with neighborhood leaders throughout the city of Fort Wayne. If there is a request that's being made in a neighborhood, whether it's a councilman walk on the weekend or a neighborhood meeting that they have every other month because they're not as big, and they have any requests, we do try to attend these. So the neighborhood outreach is huge with this, and in regards to that, it does tie directly with our cost share program. We've talked in length over the week just in the fact that 300 to 400 residents that sign up for this, that's 300 to 400 residents that we meet with, each one individually as a project. So you take a regular neighborhood project that's out and you hold a meeting, a public meeting for it, you may get 20 residents show up, maybe more, maybe less. With this, we're meeting with them directly. They feel like they have a share in what's going on. And to be frank, the cost share program has been hugely popular since its growth. It's gone from 150,000 to over $1 million this last year in regards to the amount of sidewalk we can do. Now, in those 4 years, as Sean stated, we've had over $1.3 million of property owner investment back onto our city sidewalks. That's $1.3 million that we save to spend on other city projects and infrastructure in public works. And so that speaks volumes to what residents want to participate in. If they're willing to put money into it, then this program wouldn't be as popular. So, I'm charged with a lot of city sidewalk infrastructure projects and replacement. And we really do get to know the neighborhoods that we invest in, and that you all help decide what infrastructure goes where. And it does help because it makes the resident feel like the citizen that is in a home on the other side of town, wherever it may be, isn't here, and the city worker is here or council is here. We're really tied together because we work, play, and drive here. So it feels like a bigger connection when we go and do this. And that doesn't just speak for the Barrett Law program. That could speak for our trip hazard and our leveling and our street department that's out there, and any other miscellaneous items that we need to go and replace. So in regards to public outreach, we have been very much invested in the neighborhoods and meeting with each one of the neighborhood leaders and individuals. So they don't always come to Citizen Square by any means. We are out with them during the day and on the weekend. So in regards to public works outreach, we do try and strive to meet their demand, whatever their request may be.
You gonna put a sweat on, y'all. I'm
So
cold.
before we open it up for council questions, were you
What was that, Delana?
I said I'm about to go put a sweat on. I'm cold.
Girl, me too. I just put my coat on. It's a little chilly in here.
I'll be right back.
okay? Because that does address the cost share. So you guys will be happy to know that the cost share is taken care of. So that program is addressed in the revision. So I'm glad to hear that it looks like you'll be able to support that. Then on the trip hazard, I just want to make sure when you do the trip hazard repair, you're shaving off a part of the sidewalk. If the sidewalk has been unleveled, you're shaving it off, but the root cause that's causing the problem underneath, it still exists, so the sidewalk could potentially become unlevel again. Is that true?
That's correct. To be honest, a lot of those, if it's 2 inches of a heave or less, we take care of it with that. And we see about 75% of them being from fully mature trees already. So the problem may not happen again, but we are taking the chance of trying to stretch the dollar on doing the shaving versus the full replacement, because chances are it is because of the root damage. And if we take the tree out, just depends on who you're talking to. Some have emotional ties to it, and some don't. Some would like to keep them, some don't. But either way, it doesn't affect the infrastructure.
Gotcha. Thank you. Councilman Freisterfer, you had a question.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Nick and your staff and Sean for all the work you guys have done as far as your communication with the quadrants and the neighborhood and so on. I know there's a lot of input back and forth. As seen from the screen, Councilman Didier, Patty, Hines, myself, and Crawford all voted for that lit. And part of that was with alleys. My two major concern with this whole thing was basically how is this going to affect our alleys? And I know you alluded to that. And second, I really didn't understand the cost share program within the urban core. Had a pretty in-depth conversation with Councilman Yale today. And from what I understand is that the cost share program and the Barrett program will still exist in this inner core, and these sidewalks will be prioritized. I guess my comment on that is that if the sidewalks are still in disrepair, most of those sidewalks that are going to be prioritized by the administration would not have gone through the 50-50 share program to begin with, because those people obviously don't have the money to do it. Would you agree on that or not?
We'll talk about the other programs that we have.
Yeah. It's a yes and a no. I don't think you can give a direct answer depending on where you are, whether somebody could afford it or not. It is in regards to the options that we give available. If somebody comes forward and says that they would like to, replace their sidewalk, we, the city, are giving them an option to participate in the 50-50, whether it is a cost share up front, a Barrett Law as part of the loan program itself, or we look into it as maybe it is a trip hazard, and they're just concerned because they have elderly parent that lives with them that can't traverse the sidewalk, and they would like to take care of that trip hazard. Well, chances are, if we're looking at that in other parts of the neighborhood, they may be part of the trip hazard program that does get covered at 100% and throughout the rest of the neighborhood. Otherwise, we do direct them to try and stick to a cost share one way or another, directly influenced by the ordinance that we have for the city for adjacent property owners or property owners to fix adjacent and abutting sidewalk that's out of disrepair.
And I discussed that. I had a meeting with your department, but we still see these sidewalks that are in disrepair. With all the things we've done with the lit, with all the progression, we still see the sidewalks. And I guess my only summation of that would be that those people just can't afford it. They can't afford to call and say, I'm going to go 50-50, and they're not ADA compliant. So in that respect, I think prioritizing these sidewalks, would be something we would look at and still, obtain and secure that 50-50 program and the Barrett program. So that was my first question. My second question was, how much will this affect our alleys? Because I know that's a major concern to us, the councilman that voted for that. How much do you think that will affect the money going into our alleys?
So the only amendment that we have seen is the amendment that Councilwoman Chambers submitted. I think it was at 2:30 this afternoon is when I got a copy of that. So we looked at that, and based on the revenues that we're seeing, I don't think that amendment is going to really change what we do a whole lot. One of the things that Nick didn't quite mention is that when he solicits for people to participate in the program that we have, we do get a lot of people say, hey, I want to fix income. I can't do the cost share program. Someone will say, I just lost my job, or I'm unemployed now. I can't participate in this. We do take those into consideration, and we do provide sidewalk improvements to those areas at no cost. But we have to have a conversation with them. We don't know where we are going to do them at no cost. We don't know where we are going to do them at cost share. What we do is we provide all the options that they have available and have them pick how they want to do it. Once again, going back to how it's going to impact alleys, like I said, if we go with the amendment that we've already seen so far, I think the impact, there will be a little bit of impact, because I think we're not quite meeting the $1 million in the sidewalk rehabilitation in the core area yet. But since we're talking about prioritizing them, depending on how many requests that we get, if they meet the criteria and we are only required to spend as much money as we have been spending after we prioritize them, it shouldn't have any impact on the alleys. But if we get more requests than what we're spending in right now that meet the criteria, there probably will be some impact. We might have to do a couple fewer alleys or cut short on doing some new sidewalk construction projects. Until we get that information back, we really don't know. But what I do really want to emphasize is that when it comes to people's ability to afford sidewalk improvements, we do still take that into consideration today. We don't force people. The cost share program is definitely not something that we force on people. It's simply an option that is presented to them. And the cost share has two components. One is they can pay up front, and two is the Barrett Law program, where they can get a low interest loan to be paid over a 10-year period. One other thing about some of these neighborhoods is we have over 100 neighborhoods that are managed by management agencies like the Newcomb Group. So we've been working with them quite a bit, and they've identified areas in the neighborhoods that they manage, and they pay the cost share program that the neighbors should pay out of the dues that they collect from their association. So that's been a tremendously popular program. What that has done is it has taken money away from the Barrett Law program and put more into the cost share, where they actually pay up front for us to do the
Do you have a program like that, Sean, for neighborhoods that aren't active neighborhood associations?
So, you want to talk about some of
It
this?
all, it all depends on who we've contacted, because we do know that there are a lot of inactive associations. One being, just off the top of my head, I spoke to Indian Village, right? They are not associated anymore, but we are in major talks with them. I know they have a lot of sidewalk needs. That's a lot of old infrastructure out there. And we just prioritize what exactly and how much sidewalk they have with the funds that we get associated with every year. So it is just an outreach goal for us to go through each one. So in regards to having a list of, let's say, associations that are not together anymore, we do have that list, but really much of our impact is by the 311 calls, the requests that come in from a number of sources, and we go and investigate and then prioritize based on that.
I'll give it to Councilman Didier, but I just want to respond to one of yours, because that's one of my major concerns and the reason that I'm a huge supporter of the ordinance that's moving forward is because in areas, especially in some of the urban core, where the neighborhood associations are defunct and where there is no one to call and say these streets need to be repaired, they're being, I don't want to say they're being missed, but they're definitely not being repaired. I can give you a list of streets right now. One I have very personal because I fell on the sidewalk myself and took pictures of the dirt all over me because I was so aggravated that that sidewalk was like that. So that's why I asked, is there something that's in place for neighborhoods that are not active, that are defunct, where they are not being missed as well? Because we do know when we have great active neighborhood associations that they get the work that they need done because they're ringing the bell. But the neighborhoods that don't have them are not getting that same treatment. Councilman Didier?
Yeah, just want to piggyback on what Councilman Freistoffer said. You know, I too, when I voted for this, I like the setup the way it was in 2017. You know, I mean, it was the whole thing, and Glenn can attest to this as well as Jeff. You know, we were concerned because of our districts, you know, that we needed help in our alleys, and the alleys are extremely important to me. So I just wanted to make sure that the funding was not going to be hurt from that standpoint with what Russ is trying to bring forward. That was the whole gamut in regards to why we were. I was so adamant about it because we, as Sean stated, it's well over 100 years. You know, I mean, there's alleys in the third district, especially in some in the fifth and sixth, and I know there's some in the second that were in disrepair. They're just in horrible condition. You know, you have cave-ins and the sewage and all that stuff because of the sewage going down the alleys. But I do appreciate, you know, meeting with all of you yesterday and, you know, explaining a lot of things to me. I guess my question really is going to Russ and the cost share, Russ, and what they're talking about, and the allocation of the funds. You know, I guess I want a better explanation from you in regards to what you feel is going to be lost here. And, you know,
I'd be
Sean,
happy to address
yeah, because Sean said that, you know, there could be a situation where we have so many requests that it could take allocations away, which could hurt me in North Crest, like you said. So I wanted to make sure that, is there an amount or a number that you're looking at that you would want to allocate each year? That way it doesn't, you know, for these particular types of, you know, Sharon brought up the obligation of basically no cost. And that way we wouldn't go over the threshold of what they're talking about. So I'll let you answer that question.
Do you want me to do that now?
I would, which is, unless you want to wait.
So he's talking about North Crest. So some of that money would go to his project, and he's like, oh, well, can we put a cap on the sidewalk work? Is that what he's saying?
So this is what he was saying last week.
We were very, very, very adamant.
He's concerned about his project. Yeah.
Funds for,
see, that's bullcrap, because now he's like, okay, now this is on. He's talking about how people are going to start making calls to 311 about issues with
60% of the
sidewalks, and
residents
he don't want an
were renters.
overflux because he
And that
doesn't
was
want it to
another
step into
issue
his
that we had
project,
talked
and that's
about, and
bullshit.
You guys
You know what I
assured
think
us
we
if
should
go
do
out and
is we should
those
go out
areas
and
where
walk the
high rental
streets
concentration,
and call
look
311
at
as we
making
walk.
sure, and I
You know what
believe
I'm
not
saying?
burning
I'll go out there and
some.
walk all the streets on
The
the
only
south
other
side,
question that I
get a
had,
team
and
together,
I'm
and walk the
very
streets and call
supportive of
311.
whatever
Hey,
Well, you
Russ and
know who
Michelle
needs
can
to
come
do
up
it?
with
The
that
city
would
council
advance
person who represents that
quality
district
of life
needs to
improvement
lead
as
a
it
walk
relates
out
to
there in their
infrastructure. So
district
I
calling
commend
311.
both
That
of you
needs to
for
they
be
should
led
have
not by
inspectors.
changemakers, but by
proposing
the city council person
But
who
I don't know if it's
represents that district.
true. But if a
Like, why
street is
don't they have
concrete and it's
inspectors?
repaired,
They're so worried
you do the
about an
sidewalks
overflux of
in
calls
association with
that's
the
going to
ones.
prevent them from
Is that
doing
accurate?
projects, their own
If
projects in
we
their own
do
district,
comprehensive
when they know the
street
south
repairs,
side is
regardless of
hurting.
whether
That's
it's
why
concrete,
that's what he
asphalt, or
was talking about.
chip and seal, we will
They
use
don't
You don't want
care.
the south side to take all the money.
as a part of it. It's sidewalk,
This is why
curbs,
we
curb
always
ramps,
say
we
we
will do
can't
all
work
of
with
that,
these
no matter
people.
what material the street is.
Mhm.
The only time we don't
We
mix
negotiate with
sidewalk work is if it is part of a resurfacing package. The resurfacing packages are primarily we mill and resurface, and it's just one asphalt contractor. They do the work. We don't have subcontractors on them. So when we do a project like every year we do a comprehensive street improvement project in every single district. These are not all concrete streets. Just to give you an example, we did in the 6th district, Pettit Rudison. We've been working in Pettit Rudison for a few years now, but there's so much need in that area. They're not all concrete streets. There's concrete, there's asphalt, there's chip and seal. So we work on all of those streets, and we are fixing the sidewalk while we're out there. That's not just a resurfacing project. Greater Macmillan Park was another one. Hillcrest in the 5th district, we did that project a couple of years ago. We completely revamped every single street. They had asphalt, chip and seal, concrete. It's a major street reconstruction project. So it's not just concrete streets that we do that in. We do that on any major neighborhood concrete and neighborhood repair project.
And Sean, my last question, it used to be very effective when I represented the 6, we would sit down.
But you notice
with
nobody's
the
saying
residents,
anything
and you
about
guys
that.
would walk through all
Let
the
me see what
projects within the district. And I'm just curious, are you doing the same kind of thing with identifying sidewalks and alleys in each district?
So one of the things that we did at the time was we had a very limited budget for our cost share program at the time. We still do the neighborhood requests. We send out the letters in February, we get responses in around April or so, and we just didn't have enough funds at the time to do the amount of requests that we received. So we had to get council members to come and prioritize those requests so that we could allocate our limited resources. What's happening right now is we will get requests and we have the funds to fulfill all of those requests. The only thing only time we don't get to a request is if it comes in too late in the year, in which case we move it, push it on to the next year. We will still have the funds for it next year.
Or you do miscellaneous projects? You have done miscellaneous projects under that, guys,
Yes.
when it's towards the end of the year also. That's all I have, thank you.
All right. I think that's all the questions for you, Sean, from council. So
when he
thank you.
represented
Stay
the
close
6th
in case.
district years ago. He
It's
asked if they
funny.
were doing the same thing as when he represented the 6th district years ago.
It's funny that no one is saying anything about what this man just said.
No.
Woman Chambers,
You
please.
just forward your map so you can remind. You have my amended map in there. I think it's this one here. Oops.
I'm sorry, this one right here.
Just to remind
I
you that
like
the
the
original
amended
boundaries
map
that Russ
that
had
Chambers came up with,
in the original
which he
bill
overviewed
with
last
the
week,
red
it was a
boundaries.
good idea.
Okay.
I asked that we see the other highlighted yellow. That's where it's been expanded out to, just to go further out into the city, the census tracts. Just wanted to remind you of
Okay.
that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Councilwoman Chambers.
You're welcome. We'll just switch names
Yeah.
today.
No problem.
Councilman Yale, I'll give it back to you.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the administration that is going to speak, though?
Gary?
There is?
Gary, to talk
Gary.
about.
I'm here to
Numbers.
answer any questions you may have.
Numbers.
No. Okay, numbers, Gary. They've asked a lot of questions about whether or not we'll be able to do this. It sounded like we were again told that we would have to move money from one place to another. We've heard that before. And we would like you to explain the numbers to us.
Sure, just briefly, I'll give you a summary that I spoke to Mr. Yell yesterday, and it's really, I guess I would describe it as good news, is I really don't see any effect on the numbers short term. Long term, possibly, but not significant in my opinion. I don't see it affecting anything with Riverfront Phase 2 or 3. We have some flexibility. I mentioned yesterday to Russ when we talked about we had moved at council's wish the commitments for the Lofts project and the Premier Riverfront project, the city's share of the commitment, over to the Riverfront lit. And if we were to have any issues down the road, could be 10 years, could be longer, we possibly would have to look at adjusting those, moving back to the regular lit. But again, my summary is I don't really see any effect. So.
Gary, I have one question for you,
Sure.
And then I'll call on council members who would like. This doesn't go into effect until 2023, so that would give us time to prepare for any
Absolutely.
alley sidewalk reductions, correct?
Correct. And that must be a change because my understanding was 22. Maybe I read that wrong. But
We're cleaning that up for you.
okay, gotcha.
Thank you.
No problem.
Council members? All right, thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Is there
Thank you.
anyone else from the administration that wants to speak? No?
I just had a question about, I don't know if this would be directed to Gary or not. In Sean's presentation, it indicated that shifting the allocation among sidewalks and alleys, with more money spent on repairs, less money will be spent on alleys and new sidewalks connecting schools. So is there going to be a shift, as written, where we have less money going towards alleys and sidewalks? 1 minute it's no, and 1 minute is yes. What is the actual, is there going to be an effect? So I don't know if that's a Gary or a Sean question.
Gary or Sean, could you come back to the mic? There's a question for either one of you that's willing to take a stab at it. I'm sorry about that.
So if I understood right,
I'm just looking at your bullet here. With more money spent on repairs, less money will be spent on alleys and new sidewalks connecting schools.
So,
Did he not make
so
it
basically what we're
himself?
seeing here is, you can see that we have spent more money on new sidewalk construction. That's 8.9 million, 6.8 million on alleys, and 3.5, and this is just from the LIT non-reverting only. We actually spent about $4.5 million on sidewalk reconstruction from non-LIT non-reverting sources as well. So the point I want to make here is that these three lines, depending on how many projects we get in the census tract and in the area that is going to be defined by this ordinance. I don't know if the ask is going to be $1 million, if it's going to be $500,000. If we get, I think we'll be spending about 3.5 divided by 4 is just under $1 million. So if we get just about $1 million in requests, and we had to do all of those $1 million worth of sidewalk improvements in this area that is going to be covered by the ordinance, then we will be doing cost share sidewalk improvements outside of this area using other funding sources, right? Because the other funding sources are not covered by this ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
But if we get more than $1 million in requests, then that means we will be looking at reducing the amount of money we spend on new sidewalk construction and alley repairs. For alleys, we don't have another funding source. It's primarily lighting on reverting. For new sidewalk construction, this 8.9 million is all lighting on reverting, but we do road reconstruction projects that will include sidewalk infrastructure that is not part. For example, Maple Crest Road. All of the sidewalk we put on there didn't hit our lighting on reverting. St. Joseph was the same. But if you look at projects like Reed Road or Rockman Road, Wheelock, yeah, right. So those are all projects where, I mean, there are other sources of funding for new sidewalk construction. However, they are not dedicated sidewalk projects that we've been working on. I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Sean the question then. So, Sean, on the cost share, so I just want to know, you're saying, like, say, $1 million goes. Is there not a limit to what you would be able to do? And that's, I guess, the question I'm asking in this ordinance that Russ is trying to put forward. I mean, I like what he's talking about because it's going to help neighborhoods, but at the same time, you're saying it's going to be $1 million and then we're not going to have any money for anybody else.
So let me put it this way. Right now we're spending about $900,000+ from LIT non-reverting in sidewalk rehabilitation citywide, right? We are being asked to spend $1 million in just the area that is covered by the ordinance. That means I had to find another source of funding to spend outside of the area that's covered by the ordinance.
Yeah, but does this ordinance mean that you have to
It asks us to prioritize them.
Okay. That's a question, but I'll ask Russ after I use it.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Okay. So, with no one else from the administration wanting to speak, we'll move into discussion amongst ourselves with the ordinances that are at hand. We've had several pieces of paper shared with us with some revisions going on. Since this is being brought forward by Councilman Yale, I will defer to him to explain his ordinance first, and then we'll ask Councilwoman Chambers to highlight her modifications to her ordinance amendment.
So, Alicia.
All right, looks like it's pulled up now.
So
What?
they explained all of this stuff last week, but Councilman Yale, and he usually does this is his MO, he will explain everything one week and request for there not to be a vote, because what they do is, if he thinks that the vote is going to be against him, which Didier and them would have voted against him because they want the money for their projects and not for this project. And so what he did was, when he felt the temperature change, he said, I'm going to ask for there not to be a vote this week and for us to come back and vote next week, which is what they're about to do now. But what they do is they have meetings before the meeting to try to sway people in their way, right? So that's what he's doing. But they're about to explain this whole thing, this entire thing all over again to try to convince the same people to vote their way. You're gonna have the same people voting the exact same way, I'm convinced. But Didier is really hard set on, he wants the money for his projects. He even mentioned last week the projects north of the river and the downtown park projects and all of that. So those are his concerns. So this stuff they're talking about now is exactly what they spoke about last week.
And I wonder what those meetings were like. I wonder what, you know what I'm saying? Because when they have private meetings outside of here to get together and strategize and whatnot, what are you offering these people? Or like, what is your, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is your real strategy here? Like, how are you trying to convince these people to change their vote?
There had to be some type of compromise, because Didier is the only person who's speaking about a meeting before the meeting. So I'm sure that the meeting was probably with him and the ones who usually vote along with him in order to try to sway their votes. I'm sure that like Councilman Hines and Chambers and Tucker, they probably weren't in that meeting. But you know, it was these other folks. And like you said, there was probably some type of offering in order to get this thing passed.
Mm-hmm.
If it does pass.
What's up, Xerius?
That there might be some supplemental lit. You still only use that very conservative.
You didn't miss
1%
much.
Factor. You're talking about
They just
$315
BSing
million
around
over the next 25 years, which is the duration that this bill covers. So, as Sean pointed out, there are present plans in motion. He showed that 5-year plan, which includes the 2 riverfront bonds, as well as the tapered expectations for sidewalks and alley funding. And so this is roughly extrapolating that over the next 25 years. This is how the current projections look, where we are heading. 2 phases of riverfront, $99 million approximately to cash flow those. Lofts at Headwaters, Riverfront Promenade, both the 2 Barrett programs, $29 million over that term. And as Gary was kind enough to point out, those are not legally obligated to be carried out of this fund. If this fund ever gets too tight, that can be shifted back over into general limit. We're going to be doing a substantial amount of acquisition, engineering, stabilization of the riverfront. That's projected for the next 5 years to be $6 million. I don't know if there is anything long term. Urban trails, I projected that to go in perpetuity. If so, that's $7 million. Annual maintenance in perpetuity as well. That comes out to be $7 million over that term. And then as Sean pointed out, because sidewalks and alleys are front loaded, they are then tapered out to only $3 million in years 4 and 5. And then to reach that safe harbor of 1/3, you actually only have to spend something like $2.7 million over the as a normative amount over the generational over the next several years, 20 years or so. With that though, those expenditures, as mighty as they are, do not even come close to accounting to the extent of the fund or the fund's capability. Depending on if you are simply conservative or if you are super conservative in your estimates, you still would have $83 million to $113 million of unobligated funds generated by the that would turn into a cash balance. So the only thing that this bill proposes that affects the finances is doing by doing the reset would then interject more money into sidewalks over the next generation. And I've quantified that in my previous presentation, but it's about $1 million a year roughly. And okay, so now I got it to move. So if we implement this, how does that $300 million break down? Well, you still are going to do Riverfront Phase 2 and 3. Those are still the same costs. The lofts at Headwaters, the Riverfront. Still doing acquisitions, urban trails, annual maintenance. And then I left the exact same number, the sidewalks and alleys, for the existing program, $73 million. There's a great deal of confusion, as you heard, as to whether or not implementing this bill, whether my intent is then to rob Peter to pay Paul for the program. I've left that same million at $73 million with the tapering, as with the
How about
implements bill.
Peter
As you can
needs to
see,
give up the money?
$73
We don't
million
need to
there,
rob Peter.
$73 million
And
here.
Paul needs to be
Then you
paid.
add the sidewalk
Child
replacement
He just-
program,
reparations. How about that?
which is roughly
He
a
just
third
comes
of
off
the total sidewalk
like
and alleys.
as one of those white guys that
That's
will
$36
attend
million.
an alpha
Basically,
male
your
funds
cash balance
Okay.
is reduced, and that
Yeah.
brings
Like-
Well,
us
right
anywhere
now he's
$47
speaking to the
$77 million.
needs of
So
Thomas
when I
Diddy.
say
He put
I
that
believe we
stuff
can do
wasn't
all
in
of
his
these things,
presentation last week.
that's why I
He
believe
put
we can
that
do all
in
these things.
there
I think we
to
can do all these
appease
things
Diddy.
and end up with $50
It's
million or $75
he literally
million
fits the
for
description.
future
I
elected
can just
officials,
imagine
to
what it's
figure
like
out how to
speaking with him
wisely spend.
outside. Like I couldn't do
So let me
it.
go through a couple more
Him or Diddy?
clarifications.
Or both?
Him especially.
Girl,
Is
he's
he,
barely welcomed into the room.
isn't he
Here is
short?
the room.
Is he short?
Make sure that I can read
He's
it off
short,
my
right?
computer because it's
Yes,
really far
honey,
away.
He's
on
short
my
and he's
computer.
balding.
All right,
Those are the qualifications
This
to
bill
be
is in addition and
an alpha
separate
male.
to our cost sharing programs. The 50-50 split still exists. If this bill were to tear apart the 50-50 split,
Oh
prohibit it,
man,
defund it,
he at least
do
got two. He
anything
got 3
to,
strikes. 'Cause I know
to
he's probably a
destroy it,
misogynist.
I would suggest that my own bill is a terrible bill and that you shouldn't vote.
So he
for
got
it.
3 strikes
If
against
I
him.
believe that, I would vote against it. The vast majority of the sidewalks,
3 strikes.
regardless of after we include this amendment, to clarify that the cost share program still exists.
He's going to start him a podcast.
We still
He's
are
really
faced with the problem. You
backtracking.
can't cost share your way to
I
entire
guess the good old
streets
boy scared him.
where there's sidewalks.
He must
are
not have been
fixed,
able to convince him
because
in that
it's entirely voluntary.
off the camera
and the
meeting.
sidewalk condition is only as good as the one guy,
He's really trying
or one
hard.
gal, or one landlord that won't participate in the program. Second of all, the sidewalk ordinance is still full force in effect. This doesn't change the sidewalk ordinance. This is just simply an additional funding tool like the many others, several of which Sean outlined, that already exist to get people's sidewalks fixed. It doesn't change the ownership responsibility. It doesn't change the ordinance. It doesn't change that the eyes of the law in the city of Fort Wayne that sidewalks are homeowners' responsibilities. This is going to help especially arterial sidewalks, high foot traffic sidewalks. It's going to help sidewalks that are really old. It's going to just basically provide funds where we can step in and fix some really high value areas that no matter how much money we make available to cost share, just simply will not be fully transformed. The reset prevents the robbing Peter to pay Paul idea that was explained and that Sean is very concerned about. The bill very painstakingly prevents that. It does so by the reset, and that's because, as Sean's pointed out, we only have to spend to reach the floor. We only have to spend 26% of the lit funds over the next 20 years to reach that 1/3 safe harbor, because it's been front loaded. This resets it so that you, instead of only having to spend 26% of the funds on neighborhoods, you have to spend 1/3. That's in line with the principle that all of you that created this wanted, and so this stays with that principle. And so where does the additional funding come from? It comes from the difference between spending 1/4 of the funds long term versus spending 1/3 of the funds long term in neighborhoods. So there's no robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it prevents it even from contemplating that by demanding that at least 1/3 by the reset, demanding then that 1/3 are paid for, rather than the 1/4 that exists. It still provides lots of flexibility. If there is a year where the funds are tight, maybe if we enact a bond, or if we do more acquisition, it still has all the flexibility, just like we talked about before. In 2020, we simply took the neighborhood infrastructure funds to zero. That's because it provides the flexibility. We were concerned about the pandemic. It was rightly restored. This still gives all of that flexibility. It doesn't hamstring us. It just says that generationally we're going to hit that 1/3 benchmark going forward, rather than 26% going forward. The administration is in control of what sidewalks will be fixed. There is no entitlement created. I can't call up and say fix my streets because council just passed a sidewalk ordinance bill. The administration will pick, and they do a great job. Sean's already explained why we should have so much confidence in him and Nick in selecting the right streets. The sooner they put it in the capital improvement plan, the more transparent it'll be of which sidewalks on what streets will be fixed. And then anybody that isn't in line to get those sidewalks will simply go to the cost share program that we've been talking about, and it will encourage them. And then I do want to point out that this bill is quite modest. It's been talked about that, hey, we throw out cost share, now the city is going to fix 100% of all the sidewalks and it's going to begin in the urban core. That's not possible with $1 million. I'm not suggesting that. It's not going to transform the urban core, but it will transform $1 million worth of the urban core on average in a year, and it will do so in the most important areas picked by our professionals in working together with community development and our neighborhood associations and our partnerships. And so I think it will be very impactful. I think it'll be so impactful, I think we'll want to fund more, not less, once it establishes itself. So that is the extent of my clarifications. Thank you for your time. But I did, before I turned it back over to the chair, I did want to just ask Connor to clarify. We have gone out of our way with the resolution to clarify that this does not get rid of the cost share programs that we're all extolling and supporting and want to continue.
That's correct, and we've added some language which is now in the fourth amended version, which I'm not sure if you've seen yet, but we have added some additional language to help clarify that point, which should be provided to everyone.
Yeah. So I would just say, in conclusion, we all know that if we give a third of the fund to the neighborhood, that is to the neighborhoods, that is going to be more impactful than only giving them 26% going forward. It would be robbing Peter to pay Paul if there wasn't the reset. The reset ensures then that more money flows in the neighborhoods, and that additional money is going to go to fixing the sidewalks in places that are strategically impactful. So thank you very much.
Alrighty, thank you, Councilman Yale. And so then we will do. You guys have the amendment in front of you. This is when Councilman Yale and I worked together to try to bring this language forward to make sure that it was not impacting the cost share. And so the amendment just simply reads, this section will not otherwise impact the Public Works cost share program in any way. The cost share program will be triggered by a single resident or a group of residents who have contacted the city for sidewalk infrastructure repair. Areas or neighborhoods identified by community development or public works are eligible either to participate in the cost share program or for sidewalks paid for in their entirety by the city within the approved parameters presented here. Implementation of this ordinance is in budget year 2023. So I think that addressed all of the concerns that Sean had brought to the table for or at least the reasons that he believed the ordinance should have a real good review or look over. So I think that amendment number 4 goes to that. But we will give Councilwoman Chambers an opportunity to present the amendment that she had brought forward, which is amendment 3.
Okay, so I'm number 3. So you'll have this here, but actually you want to take it from the one that has number 1 on it. And just to refresh your memories, I'm in full support of what Councilman Rushell has come up with in reference to directing more dollars to our streets. My concern became when we were identifying it at no cost to any of the residents, and that it was limited. That's why I had Sean bring back up the map of the area that Councilman Yale had identified. So if you can just kind of memorize that map. I asked to expand it out, to put in more of the census tracts, and the language that I've added, it's a number 3. We didn't have a definition, but I added eligible resident. So a resident whose household income is less than 60% of the area median income for 2 of the prior 3 years. That was a recommendation from our council that we defined it as such. And then when you go over to page 2, again, we are just defining all of the neighborhood eligible residents, and then it continues on with legacy neighborhood and then the high traffic neighborhoods as well. I just wanted to make sure that as presented by Nick and Sean, if there are residents who have the capacity to participate in the cost share program, that they're able to do that. And as you've heard from this evening from Nick and Sean, that if a resident cannot pay for it, they're not made to pay for it. Because Councilwoman Tucker did give me some numbers in reference to what that 60% or 80% will look like of someone bringing home a weekly income. And so based on that, they may not be able to pay for it. I am happy to learn to understand that the city still does repairs for family households that do not have the capacity to pay for those repairs. So I just wanted to extend your boundaries as well as identify those census tracts where we have a lot of concentration of low to moderate income individuals. So those were my amendments that I wanted to add to that. We expand the boundary and we clarify and define eligible residents.
So Councilwoman Chambers, are there any questions from the council?
Where would you extend the boundary?
Okay, can you pull, Stacy, would you pull Sean's presentation back up and we'll go to that last map? Because if you'll look at Councilman Yale's, you can see it here too, Councilman Vice Robert. This is his boundaries right here, right? And we see we have a high concentration of census. You all are going to see it as well. We just took it out further here to add these census tracts. Because we do repairs throughout the entire city, and I just did not want to just limit it to this concentrated area.
Tell me when.
One more? There you go. So the,
No, go ahead, you're fine.
So, and Councilman, I believe that you agreed to including those census tracts when we were here last Tuesday, that you didn't have issue with that, expanding it out.
I think it makes a lot of sense to making the eligibility include low-income census tracts. I would think that would be a great compromise, especially if that earns your support. I did want to clarify, though, originally as proposed, it took out a lot of the part that was originally in there, and specifically in my district, it would have removed Northside, North Anthony, and Francis Slocum. Does your amendment, is that a true addition to, or does it partially replace eligibility and prohibit some within the legacy urban core as originally defined?
I believe that it expands it out to more of the districts further out. So I don't.
And then the second question I had along those lines, the intent of this bill is to take a street that is highly strategic and high foot traffic and use these funds to replace it. I want to make sure that we wouldn't then have to means test every single homeowner on a street or business owner on the street.
No, I don't believe that we would have the means test. I mean, Nick and Sean, they have been successfully securing, encouraging, and getting $1.3 million worth of cost shares done, where we've been able to get 9 more miles, if I'm not mistaken, through the cost share program. So no, I'm not looking for nobody's tax returns to prove,
All right. Connor, you've reviewed it. Does it subtract at all from the original urban definition, and then does it define eligible on a address basis, or does work still have the purview of which my intent is to pick a street of high value that otherwise wouldn't be fixed through cost share, and then does it make any sort of individual mean tests, or does Public Works still have the ability to say, well, here's the street we're fixing?
As currently written, an eligible resident would be defined as a resident whose household income is less than 60% the area median income for 2 of the prior 3 years. So as currently written, there would be a household requirement, but the definition could be modified, changed, altered. It's already been, again, we've played back and forth with this today. There might be different ways to address that issue, so.
So, I have a couple of questions before I open it up to the rest of the council. I have a couple of concerns, Councilwoman, and I shared with you the one. When we look at the 60% of the area median income, I've given you a couple of numbers. I'll share it with the council. If someone's making $45,000 a year, we divide that by 12. I believe the number was 22.5 or
22.5.
22.5 a month. Divide that by 4. That tells you their income, and they would be required to participate in the 50-50 cost share. If we move the number to 80%, that would be an individual making $3,000 a month, divide that by 4, and they would be eligible to, they would be required then to participate in the 50/50 cost share. Those are, in my humble opinion, I'm not sure if that will address the concern that we have. Because right now, part of the concern that we have are high-traffic neighborhood areas that can participate in the cost share, but can't afford to participate in the cost share. And if we keep that eligibility language, we continue to endorse what is already in existence. And so that's one of the concerns that I have with the eligibility language, because I'm not sure it would get us to the place that we want to be. And the other thing that I would like us as a body to consider is that we want to bifurcate the 50/50 cost share and the Barrett program, because this ordinance is in addition to. It's not overriding that one. So to continue to banter back and forth about whether or not it's cost share, can they afford, this one's separate and creating a total entity. And if we then go with this in that mapping where we see the streets are not getting done, then we can address whether or not that individual within that boundary can afford to participate in that ordinance, in that boundary, and the cost share. And so that's why the amendment as written kind of makes me nervous.
Because of the eligibility requirement.
Because of the numbers, yes, ma'am.
And I can understand your concern, Councilwoman, because we don't want to make another hardship on our constituents that are living on a fixed income. But I just wanted to make sure that we are not creating an environment where there are people who have the capacity to participate in the cost share program, but because of the way that we have it written, they're like, for what? They're going to do it anyway. So no, can't do, you know.
Yep, I got you, I got you. We have Councilman Didier and then Councilman Freistraffer.
Yeah, I mean, mine goes on the same lines as, you're all speaking out of the same tongue from the standpoint if you have a house. No, if there's a house on that, or two houses on that street and the income doesn't match what you're wanting to do, then that means it kind of rebuts what Russ and you're trying to do, which is basically do the whole block, and then the other two people have to do cost share. I'm assuming that's what you're meaning?
So.
In what Michelle's proposing. I mean, because there could be two people on that house and make $50,000 a year, and then other people might make under 20. I'm just saying hypothetical, we don't know what, so there might be 8 houses on that street, and if you do it with what her amendment is saying, you're gonna have 2 houses that are gonna have to pay 50/50 or not do it. And so then that's, goes against everything what Russ is trying to do, which is do the whole block, which for myself personally, you know, I mean, I see it all over the city where we've stopped, and I've talked about this 100 times. So I understand what you want to do, Michelle, but I don't know if it can work, at least in my eyes.
Councilman Freistraffer?
Yeah, I think what Councilman Didier is trying to say is it's all about continuity. This takes me back to you, Russ. What were your parameters, or what was your criteria when you originally made those particular boundaries? I mean,
yeah, it was.
Now Michelle's trying to expand that, but
Sure. No, most primarily age of neighborhoods, but in age of the sidewalks, and we have different ways that we kind of define the urban core. Some of it also has to do with annexation. You know, how long ago? I think what the older boundaries were of the city.
And I guess that would go back.
But there's nothing magical. That's why I think Councilwoman Chambers is on to something when she brings this very relevant part of, hey, here's a common sense addition. I'm still open to adding the census tracts as part of the eligibility.
But that would take me back to a question for Sean. Sean, when you see Russ's original boundaries, and then you see Michelle's extended boundaries, can you elaborate as to how much cost share program and sidewalks are really needed in Michelle's boundaries as opposed to Russ's? Do you see a good amount of cost share program outside, or is it mostly within that inner core? Is that possible to answer?
Nick, can you help?
They had a map on.
I'm going to defer that question to Nick because he's a lot more intimately familiar with where a lot of the requests come from.
Me too.
So the question, Nick, is do we see a lot more cost share participation in the red boundary, or do we see more of it in the yellow census tract area?
Sure. To be honest, it's pretty split across the board. I mean, as you can see inside this map and on the screen, the slide before it,
Right.
those green dots represent all the participants, whether cost share or not, that has happened in the city of Fort Wayne. That's 194 different neighborhoods we've done just in 4 years of participation. So the boundaries, in our eyes, don't exist in regards to that red boundary or the new amended one. It exists in all 6 districts. So it doesn't matter whether you're in that or not. As you can see, they're everywhere. And we've had participation in dissolved and non-dissolved neighborhoods, affluent and non-affluent neighborhoods. They're everywhere. So I don't know if a boundary would help or not. I think our concern before was if you put us into where we have to prioritize inside that boundary first, how could we ever get out of it, to be honest with you? Because there's 1,600 miles of sidewalk that could need replaced. Yes, they're not all bad, but as we see around every neighborhood, the trees that are in the park strip grow every year. So we may be replacing the sidewalks in the next 20 years on the trees that were just planted now. So in a sense, you don't know what you're going to run into, but it affects every neighborhood and every street in the city of Fort Wayne, not necessarily just these bounded ones.
Thank you.
Councilman Inslee?
Councilman Yale, I came in today prepared to vote against this, but you made a compelling case, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that we do want to spend a third of our lit funds over the next 25 years on sidewalk infrastructure. What I don't agree with, and it sounds like what perhaps the administration has an issue with as well, is drawing a boundary that completely excludes the first district that I represent and every single one of my constituents that will be contributing at least proportionally to this fund, excluding every one of Councilman Arp's district constituents, a majority of Councilman Didier's, a significant portion of your own. And so it seems to me that the obvious solution is to keep the good parts here, which is the reset and the 1/3 for the next 25 years, but just scratch the line that says prioritizing legacy neighborhood and sidewalks with high amounts of foot traffic. Let's open this up to the entire city. Let every district participate. You would have my vote immediately. And I would suspect that you'd get other votes as well, and we can allow everyone to participate and not get tied too much into drawing of the boundaries and excluding some and excluding others. While again, all Fort Wayne residents are participating in the funding. So at the appropriate time, I'd be very happy to make that amendment, support the other language that you have proposed. I have no problem with any of that. But for me, I couldn't support it if it excludes every single resident of the first district, but could very much support it if we were to scratch that line.
That's a motion for amendment. I second it.
I didn't hear a motion. I just heard a statement and a conversation where you, but I would like to point out too, before you follow through with Jason, I think the spirit of, I believe the spirit of the ordinance is to help infuse repairs in areas that are not otherwise seeing the repairs. And that is the areas that have high traffic, less communicable, right? And so they're doing more walking. I'll get you, Councilman. Doing more walking, and the sidewalks aren't there, and basically just aren't able to participate in the 50-50 program. And so I believe that's why the boundaries had been drawn, to make sure that includes, and I respect and hear you saying that it's excluding a large portion of your neighborhoods, but I think it's focusing on neighborhoods that have not had the infrastructure repaired over a history of time. Thereby, your neighborhoods may not be in the disarray that these neighborhoods currently are, where those boundaries are. That's my understanding of why that's been put in place. I don't think it's to exclude anyone out of the city, but definitely to make sure that there is a strategic focus on getting those areas back to being walkable. Councilman Pata?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to maybe reiterate what you just said, Councilwoman Tucker, because I think that's important. And I think, with all due respect to Councilman Ensley, the amendment kind of takes away the significance of Councilman Yale's efforts here over the last several weeks. And I know he's been active even in my district. And this has resonated a chord in the Southwest Area Partnership, the Packard Area Planning Alliance, and other neighborhoods, because they see a lot of new sidewalk work in other areas, particularly in the more suburban areas where the schools are and so on, realizing that part of this bill came forward years ago because we decided we'd take on, out of a spirit of partnership with the school systems, particularly the Fort Wayne Community Schools, an effort to build sidewalks because the state legislature had cut funding for transportation and many children had to walk to school. So those new sidewalks in districts, particularly 1, I think in 3, maybe 2, all 4 even, maybe not 4, you're more Southwest Allen, so, but the other districts, kind of made this more top-heavy, where, if you will, that sidewalks were really going into some of these areas, and the central part of the city saw this as, well, it's good, that's good, they deserve that, but we deserve our share as well. And so continuing to work on that, because I've worked on the sidewalk issue for some time, that's one reason I welcome Councilman Yale's efforts here, because it shifts some more of these dollars into the areas that have been neglected. So not to take away from other areas that deserve sidewalks too, but I would not be able to support an amendment that would change the boundaries of this, or actually defeats the spirit of the bill that I think Councilman Yale brought forward in the first place, and took me a while maybe to get my hands around as well. But I think if I'm speaking correctly, that would not really effectively move your thoughts forward on this as well. So I would not support the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Councilwoman?
It's not in reference to the amendment, so do we still need to deal with that? 'Cause
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we have 2 amendments on place. We'll go ahead and reference Councilwoman Chambers' amendment first, because if we, depending on the outcome of that vote, then it would have a variance on Councilman Yale's ordinance. So Councilman Chambers has put forward an amendment, as you've seen in front of you, and I will entertain.
Councilwoman. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
We don't have numbers on our versions. We don't know what you are referencing as hers. So we need to go through what those changes
Madam
are.
Clerk, it would be the second page listed as number 1.
We don't have numbers on our pages.
Well, did we pass this around to?
Okay. So just the one sentence.
Yes.
Is what you're talking about. It says eligible resident, a resident whose household income is less than 60% of the area median income for 2 of the prior 3 years. So that is the only change to the original bill.
No, that's the change to your number 3 on page 1.
Let me help them.
Okay.
So the amendment that she put forward last week,
Okay.
and then she wants to make an adjustment to her amendment by adding line number 3, eligible residents. That should read according to this.
Okay. And thank you.
Replacing.
Okay, so just number 3, and then what you have on the page that says number 1.
1, correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
It's a lot of moving
It's a lot
parts.
of
So
moving parts.
That's great to
not-
see that we're working to make sure we get it right for the citizens of Fort Wayne.
So I guess my other question, Councilman Yale had an amendment also, was the first one that was brought up. So are we not going to take that one first, since his was brought up first?
So that would be the Tucker Yale amendment.
Because he was the first one to add an amendment. this evening.
Absolutely. We can do that, Madam Clerk, if that's what you would like. We can do that, that's fine. That's fine.
Nope, she is correct. I left that up first.
That's fine, not a problem at all. Okay, so we would like to have we've already had discussion on on the Yale Tucker, the one that's coded Yale Tucker with the additional paragraph added on the back. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the amendment, Yale Tucker, that we've discussed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That passes into Councilman Yale's original ordinance.
Madam Clerk, that would be listed as Amendment 1.
Yes, thank you. That is Amendment 1.
All right, the second amendment at hand is the amendment that was presented to us by Councilwoman Chambers. Councilwoman, did you still want to leave your amendment in place as it was presented?
And with the adjustment of the Yale Tucker amendment, I don't want, again, to create an environment where our constituents cannot be able to have their sidewalks repaired. I'm happy to strike number 3/1, the eligible residents, so that we can make sure that everybody can take full participation in the repairing of neighborhoods.
In both places?
On the first page then.
So the eligible resident on page 1 under number 3 stays, but on the second page it is removed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I think you would need to move it in both places, Councilwoman.
Yeah, I have to move it in both places.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Councilwoman, if I understand, the eligibility would be the original boundary plus qualified census tracts.
No, the eligibility, plus to qualify, which is going to
Yes.
expand it outside of your
And then,
original.
but there is no individual means test.
No,
So,
because if you take out the
it's a true-
60%,
okay.
yeah.
So this is a true addition, and it opens up eligibility for those
In the
that
qualified
neighborhoods
census tract.
that are in need, that obviously are in demonstrative need.
Mhm.
That would be in the spirit of what I've tried to achieve. So if I am understanding you correctly, I would second your motion.
Point of clarification, please. I'm
Sure,
sorry, Madam
please.
Chair. I know there's a lot of moving parts here.
Please.
One thing, Councilwoman Chambers, that concerns me about your amendment. You're talking about the map with the yellow area and a census tract, particularly on the other map that I believe that you had, which was your map, perhaps. It seemed as though there are so many carve-outs there. There are so many carve-outs there that, I know you're looking at a census tract, but a census tract that shows an area of, let's say, high income. When you go down a half a block or over the next block, there could be a number of residents that do not have high income. And so those people would not be eligible under this plan, if I'm reading that right.
No,
And
we've
the
taken out-
carve-out area is substantial.
No, we took
Help
out
me
the
out.
eligibility based on the income. We took that piece out, so we're not having a means test, as Councilman Yale has indicated.
So we would remain with this step 3 as written originally on this definition, and are we removing the?
We're removing the definition.
Altogether.
Remove the definition.
So
Removing
under
the definition.
Under the first whereas, it's a 1 and a 2, and it stops at that point.
Correct, Madam
So
Clerk.
that is not there. And then on the very last page, under the very last now therefore, we've got section 1 and section 2. So a section 2, the second paragraph, can you confirm?
You'll strike the eligible resident, because we no longer have it defined.
So it just says at no cost to the resident.
Correct.
So I'm sorry, what does the amendment say? What does Councilwoman Chambers' amendment say that's different than Councilwoman Tucker's?
That's what we're trying to
And when you
find.
go, okay, you strike eligible requirements, eligible resident, right? And you prioritize legacy neighborhoods, sidewalks with high amounts, and this is where I amended and/or neighborhoods in the qualified census tract as defined by the U.S. Housing and Urban Development.
So your only amendment is that after legacy neighborhoods, the "and" was removed, and then we add after sidewalks with high amounts of foot traffic, comma, and/or neighborhood in a qualified census tract as defined by U.S. Housing and Urban Development. That is the only modification or the amendment that you have.
Right.
That's the only thing we're looking at is that sentence.
But
Does that make sense?
I guess it does, but I'm troubled by the definition of a census tract and who that leaves out if this amendment passes.
but Michelle's is still outside. It still goes outside.
It still goes outside the original, Russ's original boundaries. Stacy, can you forward? I believe we have that map up there. I think it's 2 slides. Sorry, Stacy, you're getting your steps in this evening. Right, so it goes further out. Councilman Paddock, do you see that, those census tracts?
I do. I see the red line, but I see the yellow area and the area in gray or whatever that other color
Green or
is.
whatever, yeah.
Whatever that color is. Are those areas carved out? Are they not eligible?
Those are the census tracts areas that we added to Russ's original.
Okay, so we're adding them in so they are
Yes.
eligible.
So they are eligible.
Okay.
As a priority
But
area.
at first, they were not going to be
Just the red
eligible.
is what he's saying. It's
It
that
is not
whole
just
area.
the red.
But at first, those areas as the census tracts were not going to be eligible. Is that correct?
No.
Yeah, I guess I'm
So-
concerned about with what the census tract boundary is and who it includes and who it excludes.
I think we can, I think if we remove the census tract verbiage and if we just put this on hold and redraw your map, Russ, to include those.
I'm sorry, but this is a big deal, you know?
Right.
Get it right.
Stephanie wants to come up. Administration.
Stephanie Crandall, Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. Councilman Paddock, I think, are you referring to the Navy areas? Because that was already excluded. The dark, they're Navy, sorry, it's very hard to see. But the darker areas were already excluded in Councilman Yale's original proposal. And the active TIF areas.
No, that's not what
Not the dark areas, not the black areas.
she ain't making.
Oh, I apologize then.
I'm sorry. But this is important to me, folks. It looks like the area here that's just outside of the yellow.
See, it's white.
Still is?
It's white.
That's white, okay. I guess it is white.
Yeah, it's white. I know what he's saying.
I apologize.
What
I
he's
thought he
meaning,
was talking
Stephanie,
about
and if I can, I'll help him. That there's, so the whole red's part, you know, the whole red outside.
That's everything inside, yeah.
So he's wanting to know, is the white included in the census tracker now? And is it included in the sidewalk portion of it?
I think Councilwoman
That's
Councilwoman
what
Chambers'
you're
part
asking,
is,
right, Jeff?
is
That's exactly
adding.
what he's asking.
It's adding.
It's adding the yellow
This
census
meeting's
tracts
supposed to be over
outside
already.
of the orange
Mm-hmm.
boundary as well. So I think it's the way I saw her.
What I'll do is so that, and support your recommendation, Councilwoman, that we redraw the area to show specifically the census tracts that are being included, added to. We're expanding the area on the amendment that I'm doing. So would that, Councilman Yale, can we recommend to hold until we get that cleared up?
I'm agreeable because I want to get this right. Do we need a motion to hold?
I would like to see a
Not a
clear
problem.
map that I can understand. And
But I think the more I'd rather pass this with Councilwoman Chambers' support, and so I'd be happy to wait a week to incorporate it. But the bottom line is the original boundary remains, and then we're adding a couple of the census tracts outside of the boundary, and so the entire original boundary will remain.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
All right, so, how, we have a motion to hold, Councilman Yale?
Councilman,
A week or 2 weeks?
I agree with
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
All right.
That's fine.
There's a motion and a second to hold for 2 weeks.
Before you do that, can we pass the
All the amendment.
Yale Tucker amendment?
We already did.
Oh, excuse me.
It was 9-0,
Yeah, it
Russ.
was 9-0.
Apologies.
I've already been on this bill for an hour and a half, so we're good. God Schmidt be rolling.
That's okay. That's okay. We're
2
gonna
hours,
get it right. All those in favor of holding for 2 weeks, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, awesome. We will move on to R22.
Anybody against? Anybody against it?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was unanimous. Anyone voting against it?
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Thank you. Okay. R220112, confirming resolution designating an economic revitalization area, Indiana Code 6-1.1-12.1 for property commonly known as 835 Van Buren Street, 735 West Berry Street, Fort Wayne, Indiana, for Fort Ree LLC.
Good evening. This is Andrea Robinson with Community Development. Tonight before you is request for designation by Fort Ree LLC. They have a project, let me back up. Fort Ree LLC is a real estate development company. They plan to rehabilitate the former St. Joseph nursing home into a multifamily residential housing complex offering 41 units at market rate rent. This project total investment is $5.5 million. And tonight with the project, we have Rob Kruger and Zach Kessie here to answer questions.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
We're here today requesting establishment of an economic revitalization area. This is the former St. Joe Hospital Nursing Dormitory. If you're familiar with that brick building that you can see from Van Buren, it's kind of blocked by the newer medical office building out on Broadway. The plan here is to take that 40,000 square foot building, 4-story building, and have approximately 40 residential units. These are going to be almost all single bedroom, 1 bath or studio apartments. The developer in their own investigations has found that there's a shortage of that particular kind of housing option, particularly around downtown. I think your 2021 residential market study also identified that the optimum market position for downtown rental units was 50% single bedroom and studio apartments. The application, I think, had $5.5 million in construction costs. Latest budget's probably a little over $6 million at this point, which would be new roof, masonry work, HVAC system update, and refurbishing the entirety of the interior. There's already an effort to get this site in the historic registry. I think part 1 has already been filed for that. So in conclusion, serve the purposes of redevelopment. It's providing needed residential units in the optimum marketing position for downtown and maintains a historic structure. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilman Paddock?
As if I didn't talk enough the last time, right? And I'm sorry you folks had to wait so long here, but this is exciting to me, and of course we're asking for the potential here for tax phase-ins, obviously on something like this. This is I think I was reading through that this part of this building was built in the 1920s, and then another floor added around 1945 or so. So this is something that you're going to be refurbishing separate from the old hospital itself. We don't know the fate of that yet, but I think this would make a lot of folks feel good that not only is that old historic building, which I think has a lot of architectural appeal, to be preserved, but obviously you mentioned market rate housing. Obviously that's something that we're always looking for and needing more. So I certainly favor this proposal and would do pass recommendation.
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
It's a do pass recommendation of 7-2.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have R220114, a confirming resolution designating an economic revitalization area under Indiana Code for property commonly known as 9413, 9503, 9609, 9733, 9735, 9821, and 9823 Ardmore Avenue, 4010, 4202, and 4030 Piper Drive, 9307 Arvonic Drive, and 3618 Ferguson Road, 10222 Airport Drive, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46808, Fort Wayne Metals Research Products, LLC, Quinn Enterprises, LLC, TEG Investments, LLC. Hi, Andrea. Dr. Robbins.
Good evening again. You might, if I might suggest that we put the next
R22.
Yep, the next one together. It's the same project. However, they reside in two separate townships, and so that's why we had to have two resolutions. But it's the same project.
Awesome. Madam Clerk, I'll read R220116 into record. Confirm resolution designating an economic revitalization area under Indiana Code for property commonly known as 3401 MacArthur Drive, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46809 and 6901 and 6905 South Hannah, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46816. Fort Wayne Metals Research Products, LLC, QEon Enterprises, LLC, TEG Investments, LLC. Will you tell me how to properly pronounce that? I've used a different name every time.
QN, but
Coin.
Coin. Of course it is, right?
Coin. Okay, sorry about that for butchering it 101 times. Coin.
Thank you, Andrea Robinson again. And tonight before you is a request for designation by Fort Wayne Metals Research Products, LLC, Coin Enterprises, LLC, and TEG Investments, LLC, as an ERA for real and personal property. This, as you already stated, this project's at multiple addresses, and the projected cost or investment is, it's kind of separated because it's on the two different resolutions. It's going to be $20 million in personal property and $12 million in real property. This particular project, Fort Wayne Metals plans to create 335 new jobs, full-time jobs, 19 part-time jobs, with an estimated payroll of $22,704,394. The average salary for those new jobs is $64,136 a year. They will also retain 1,013 full-time jobs and 62 part-time jobs, with a total retained payroll of $54,970,361, and the average salary on those positions is $51,135. Tonight, Haley from Fort Wayne Metals is here to talk a little bit about the project. These projects do qualify for a 10-year abatement.
Awesome.
Haley?
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me tonight, but also on behalf of Fort Wayne Metals, I just want to thank you for your past and continued support. Fort Wayne Metals does have a track record for growing and developing in this community, and we want to continue to sustain and build that. As we look at this project, there are three main points I just want to highlight tonight, and that is going to be the technology, our innovation, and also our expansion plans. So with technology, we're constantly looking for ways to increase our capabilities as well as to branch into new industries. A couple examples of how this project will continue in that direction is we're broadening the scope of our aerospace and robotics departments. Additionally, we are entering new industries with our strand and cable wire. And we're also working diligently to gain efficiencies on our day-to-day manufacturing processes as well. With our innovation, Fort Wayne Metals has a really robust research and development department. And beyond just research and development, we are constantly working to develop and create new and innovative products. And just to highlight a couple of these tonight, we have a bioabsorbable material, which I find extremely fascinating. We also have a flat wire department and actuator wire, which we're not just using in the medical industry, but we're also using in the automotive industry. And finally, just to briefly touch on our expansion plans, as you know, we have several facilities in this area, and several of them are needing some expansion so that as we continue to grow, we have the space for the growth. We do have one facility in particular. We are in talks to begin the bidding phase for a 42,000 square foot renovation to accommodate our actuator wire department as it just continues to really blossom. We also have plans in place for a 30,000 square foot addition at one of our facilities on our campus. We also have facilities in Whitley
Okay, guys,
County,
so
two
because
in
the
Ohio, and
council
Ireland as
meeting
well, but we want to
ran late
develop here in Allen County.
tonight, the council meeting, hey guys, so because, Alicia, you are funny, because the council meeting ran late tonight, we are going to just end it, and we might just come back like tomorrow or later in the week and do like a recap of everything that they spoke about. So if you guys want to stay on, and we encourage you all to stay on and listen to everything that's happening tonight, everything that they're voting on tonight, so that you're aware of everything that's going on in the city. There's a lot of money being moved around, and most of the time, our community members are not privy to it. So just stay on. You guys continue to listen, and we'll come back and recap sometime this week if you guys would like for us to do that.
All right,
Sounds
y'all.
good?
All right. Peace, everybody.
Have a good night.